In this transformational conversation, I'm speaking with Aaron Baker about life in the and. Too many of us live in the or. We live in the either this or that category. And that kind of exclusionary thinking is actually extremely detrimental to pretty much everything in our lives, our relationships, our business, our health, our self-esteem. So Erin has a podcast called Life in the and she has studied and dissected this concept like nobody else that I've ever seen. We're going to talk about the art and the science of coaching. We're going to talk about what fear really is, how to become more fearful and fearless, and how all of that will explode not just your business, but your enjoyment of life on this planet. And Erin has a way of breaking down really complex concepts into digestible, understandable nuggets. You're going to love it. Welcome to this transformational conversation with coaches. And I am super excited for you to hear from Aaron Baker today. And just before we started the recording here, she said, I got to raise my prices because too many people are saying yes to me.
That's right.
And I don't know that we need to go any further than that to know how big she's playing in the world. And, I met Aaron was probably 2 years ago, I would say.
Yep.
Around that time.
Just about. Yep.
And what I really admire about you is your willingness to dive in, your willingness to confront anything and everything. And I remember one time, I don't know, maybe it was at the talent show, or maybe it was at some other event, or just in a conversation or something. And I don't even know if I asked you a question or somebody else asked you a question, but you said some version of, I don't want to, therefore yes. Like some version of, this is scary, therefore yes.
Yep.
And that's what I think of when I think of how you live your life and how you have lived your life, and especially the way you've dived into this coaching season of your life. And I know that's why you have commanded the success that you've commanded, and you've got this waiting list, and I just really honor the way you play. So thank you for that. And Aaron has a podcast called Life in the and it's just only everything.
Only everything. It's the most powerful word in the English language. And the more I dive into that word, and the more I go, shit, this really is everything.
This really is only everything.
Only everything.
And, so let's just start there. I like to start these conversations with a single word and then see what comes out of it. So that's the word. Tell us a little bit about and, or what it means in your life, or your andifesto. Or
yeah, like you said, it's literally only everything. And it started with me realizing one of the most important ands in my life, which is my gender. So people who look at me might not know that I identify as non-binary. And what that really means is some days I feel more feminine, and some days I feel more masculine, and some days I feel right in between. It is literally an and of masculine and feminine. And a few years back, I altered my body. Now my body is actually an and because I got rid of my female breasts. And I started exploring with a few people what was special about this. And then I started realizing how much of my life and my success is based on being able to hold two things that seem opposite to be true at the same time. And how when you do that, you can see paths forward that you never saw before. And you can bust through things like fear. We've talked about fear, doubt, uncertainty. And then as I started going even deeper, I realized how much of our identities are walking contradictions and ands, and how that increases our range. And when we can be, both serious and funny, we can be really powerful in our coaching. And when we can be both intellectual and heart, we talk a lot about that, how much that broadens our range. And so I started thinking about we all have all these ands in who we are. And when we bridge them, that make us more powerful. We all have these contradictions in how we think and be in the world that are powerful. And then, of course, there's the broader conversation about and in society and inclusion and love. And so every time I dive into what does and mean to me, I just get a new nugget, a new layer. And it's only everything that makes me successful, as we've already said.
Yeah. What I love about it is it's not just holding two things at the same time or holding two things as true at the same time. It's holding two things that feel opposite.
Yes.
At the same time. And that gives it even a little bit more richness, I think. And so, you know, in my mind, I'm seeing the dichotomy, right? Like two vectors going off in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that broaden the range or something like that. Like that actually gives us a bigger capacity when we have both of those edges of the spectrum, or both of those seemingly opposite truths or opposite desires. You know, one of this is not going to be profound, but one of the things that I kind of wrestle with, I guess, a little bit is like my desire for really, really dark stuff, meaning like I like studying serial killers and I like studying like organized crime. And I really like, to the point where it's almost a concern, you know, it's almost, I don't know how many times I've driven around my neighborhood because I was convinced that the person behind me was following me, right? Like I've just got
You might want to get that checked out, Sean.
Right. Like I've studied so much crime. Now I have a criminal justice degree, so there's a little bit of justification there. But sometimes I actually think that's what helps me live in this other world of peace and love and transformation and all these things. Like I almost need that counterbalance in order
absolutely
to,
need that.
you know, be functional to some degree, although some people would argue that I am.
No, I think we have to express all sides of us. And it's part of the and is accepting the parts of us that are our shadows or our dark sides. And something else that occurs to me too is how often I heard the word or several times, and I'm really attuned to words now, thanks to you mostly.
I just said?
Yeah, I hear the word or everywhere now because
right.
I see ands everywhere. But thanks to you, like I'm a language person, right? And I pay attention to words. And it's so incredible how often in life we say it's this or this. I can have a successful business or a family life. And oftentimes you just put an and in there and you go, what if? What if I have a successful business and a rich family life? And then all of a sudden your brain starts going, well, oh, what if? What might be possible? And all of a sudden you start seeing things that were not in your purview or in your vision because you've added this word. And so it's a thing I use with clients all the time because I hear them in these ors and I say, where's the and? So I have a client who wants to make some really big proposals right now. And I said, you can lean into that fear and you can be very realistic with the clients in front of you with what they can afford.
Yeah.
And I said, how do you do that? And she came up with this whole thing on how she could do that. Because in her mind, it was, I either lean into my fear and propose this amount, or I meet these people where they're at.
Which shuts down possibility.
Right.
You know, to your point, like your brain starts going, well, what if I can?
Yeah.
And we start actually answering that question. Yeah, it's amazing how just a little shift like that immediately changes everything.
Yeah.
And then we start.
I see it everywhere. I literally see the ands and everything. It doesn't have to be two things. You can add an infinite amount of ands and all of a sudden it just becomes an interesting game and what is possible.
Well, you used the word inclusion earlier, I think. And, you know, whether that is applied to our society disruption right now or taking steps in our life and expanding comfort zones or what have you. And is such a word of inclusion, right? Like my truth can be true for me and your truth can be true for you. So I would imagine, I mean, does this show up in relationships a lot in your coaching or just in your own life? I mean, just like the collision between human perspectives.
Yeah. Well, I love playing with multiple truths in general because one of my favorite questions is what else could be true? When
Mm,
people have stories in their heads, what else could be true? And I don't let them stop at one thing. And what I usually use as an example, since we're on video, this painting behind me,
yeah.
um, I ask people are fascinated by this painting and I ask them what they see. I usually zoom in the camera and every person has a different interpretation of it. And that's their truth of what the painting is about. And it's equally true to whatever Roy Schallenberg, who painted the painting, intended. And
Yeah.
so it's a great, they're all equally true.
What kind of shifts do you generally see with your clients or just with yourself, holding on to things as equally true? Like, I mean, just immediate new possibilities,
Yeah.
shift
That's
in
a, that's a
emotion.
big one. Shift in emotion. A huge one I see is if you can come up with multiple truths, you get to choose whichever one suits you in the moment. And so a lot of people are projecting,
Yeah.
especially if you think about relationships. This guy didn't call me back. Well, what could be true? What else could be true? What else could be true? And, obviously all our brains are wired towards whatever the worst case scenario is. This guy doesn't like me or whatever. And then when you notice that there's so many other possibilities, until that person tells you what their truth is, you get to choose, and you get to choose an interpretation that doesn't make you anxious, sad, disappointed, angry, or whatnot. And
Right.
it does dispel all the emotions, and it just helps people notice their own patterns of what do they automatically assume? What is the story they tend to tell themselves?
And we're all making it up anyway. So
Right.
might as
We
well
are.
make it up and
Right.
it makes us feel better.
Totally.
And I think once we sort of build that muscle, then we can tell ourselves whatever story we want, even if they tell us the other one, even if they're like, no,
Yep.
actually, I think you're an asshole. Like,
Yep.
no, you don't. Like, you're just,
Yep.
you actually admire me. No, I don't
Right.
like you. No, you admire me. And I'm just going to take that and live with that reality. So even when we're presented with other people's opinions explicitly, even though that's pretty rare, we still have the power
Mm-hmm.
to say, this is the story that I want. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you said, like that's only because we've relinquished our commitment to or.
Yeah. All the ands. And then, yes, I see huge possibility shifts. People's gears just start turning and they start seeing all kinds of ideas that didn't come to them when they were in the space of or.
Yeah, this is like creativity
Yeah.
unleashed,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I'm hearing. And
Yeah.
another and that I know you've walked with in your life is the highly developed scientific analytical piece of you that was a part of
Mm-hmm.
your life, and now this complete new like creative woo woo space.
I'm owning it.
Yeah, that I know at one point in time you probably weren't so fond of, or at least didn't believe in or trust or what have you.
No, I didn't
So how's
trust
that
it.
been? I think that's an interesting story to tell.
Yeah. So for those who don't know me, I have a PhD, and that's like all intellect, all science. I have a PhD in psychological science, right? And so my whole life, and then working at Facebook for 3.5 years and Microsoft, was data, intellect, logic, screw all this other stuff. And I grew up with an overly skeptical brain around all things spiritual, heart, emotion. And I just said to my coach yesterday, fuck goals, which is like the antithesis of what a psychologist would say, because I'm all into surrender these days.
Yeah.
And so it's been a process of really reconnecting for me with heart and intuition and deepening my understanding of what I call spirituality. And what's really fascinating is a friend of mine recently said, Aaron, you enroll people with your brain and you hold them with your heart.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's one of my favorite ands, is I enroll
Yeah.
with my brain and I hold them with my heart. And turns out that is where my superpower is. And it just took building back a muscle of creativity and being really intentional about doing the practices to connect, whether it was playing music or meditation or I went to a summer camp for a week last year and played with wood and made a wood thingy.
That's awesome.
That's what I'm calling it, a wood thingy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say I'm actually much more rotated away from the science brain, the intellect at this point in a lot of my work. And it every so often, like there's a little scientist that comes out of me, but I even wrote to my coach on an email today. I'm pretty sure they're going to take away my PhD someday.
Right. Have you guys heard what Erin's saying? What she's
right?
talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrangle her back in. So
yep.
you said build back a muscle, and then
yep.
that you said reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously supposes that there was a disconnect at some point, and now you're going back to that space of creativity and that space of heart. So I imagine that's what you've experienced personally, but that's what you believe. Like we all have that ability to
absolutely
to go back to or to unleash that creativity.
Absolutely. I think society so over rotates towards rewarding the intellect. And I've had so many conversations, including I had a fascinating conversation with someone on creativity on Life in the And how often our creativity is stifled at a young age. How early on we don't care how bad our drawings are or how our finger paintings are, but then someone comments and we get self-conscious. And so we put our creativity away and then we get rewarded for all the stuff that is going to get us a job, that's going to make us money. And so it really is about reconnecting to that little child that liked to draw, that liked to color, that liked to sing, that liked to play music, whatever it is. And it really is, in my mind, is a reconnection, but it's like a muscle in the sense that it doesn't come back right away. And you can't expect the first time you try to get creative that it's going to flow again. It's like going to the gym and you have to lift the 5-pound weight, then the 10-pound weight, and then the 30-pound weight, and then at some point you just realize, oh, the channel's open now.
And once it's open,
it's
like you said, you see and everywhere, you see or everywhere. Once that creativity is open, it just rushes out. We all create our own way, so our creations aren't going to look the same as other people's. Right. But I think there's a sacredness to this. Like each one of us have our own sacred ways to connect or our own sacred song to sing. And the word that I don't think you said, but I was hearing when you were talking about how our creativity gets stifled is then we learn to keep it safe after that. If we never try to color again, then nobody will ever tell us our coloring is bad. If we never sing, nobody will tell us that we can't sing. Right. I think the intellect is just so committed to safety.
Well, and we also get told that's not the way to be successful, right? That the creativity, there's a societal stigma around creativity. There's also a very limited understanding of what creativity is, right? People think of art. They think physical art, music. Creativity is just, it's in us. It's everything. It's the way we think. It's what, I think you're one of the most creative people with words. And it's not necessarily when you're writing poetry. It's just when you're speaking. There's creativity in coaching, right? I'm creative every day in how I coach my people. I'm making stuff up on the spot all the time. That's creativity. But we get this narrow version view of what creativity is, and we get told that's not rewarded in society. And it's even worse if you're not good at it.
Right. And then they get to decide if we're not good at it.
Right.
And then we get to pre-decide that we won't be good at it so that we make sure that we actually don't get it confirmed.
Yep. We just keep it all safe and locked away. And I really do think creativity is one of the superpowers of coaching. And it's not taught it's not, well, you can't teach creativity. I think you need to connect with it, but it's not one of those things that you hear about a lot. It's all about what are the tools? What are the boxes you can play in? And I think that when we talk about, you know, the neurotransformational tools, and you say they never survive collision with a human, but it can be really easy to stay safe in the tools. The intellect wants to know, what is the step-by-step process that I'm going to take this person through? And all of coaching is about saying, those tools are there somewhere, but I'm making my own recipe. I'm cooking something and I'm taking the flour from here and the sugar from here and the molasses from over here, and I'm baking some bread.
Yes. And most of the people that watch this channel are coaches. So I think it'd be good to dissect that even maybe a little bit more. I've been saying a lot lately that coaching is an art and it's not a science. You know, maybe someday I'll do something on the art of coaching or a book or something like that. But what you're saying is so freeing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was incredibly freeing. And this is what we see, you know, anybody that has this conversation that I know of that coaches, when they release themselves from the boundaries of the right and wrong rules, that's when they become a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some evidence, right? It takes practice. I think we probably have to fall down and not like what a certain conversation produced in order to look back and go, oh, well, I showed up with agenda, or I showed up afraid of saying the wrong thing, or I showed up trying to remind myself, what would Aaron say? Or what would, you know, Michelle say, or whoever, you know, whatever coaches we've learned from. And that is so restricted. Like I can even feel my body tense up as I say that and kind of get into that comparative coaching rather than creative coaching. And what I believe, I'm sure you agree with this, that we put ourselves in the situations to learn. And there's nothing wrong with preparing, obviously, and we learn and our brain captures all these things and we see, you know, demonstrations of coaching, or we consume the curriculum and all the things that are important. But then when we let that go and we're just truly present with another human and we're really listening, I believe our brain will do what you just said. Let me grab some sugar from over here. Or actually, I remember that one exercise over there. And so much of it happens at an unconscious level. And I think most of us don't give ourselves enough credit for how prepared we really are.
Yes.
If we were just present.
Yeah. It requires a level of self-trust that most people don't have, and a little bit of trust, which you've talked about, that the client will get what they need.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really clicked for me, and this was a while back.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you can remember the moment, so this is perfect.
Oh man, it was early on in my coaching. Actually, Michael Neal said something that I wrote on my wall, and it was like, get the fuck over yourself and be of service. And I realized how often my ego was in the way, right? I was so worried about being the good coach and being seen as the good coach that I wasn't there. And so the minute I could say, get over myself and be there, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if the question was a one-word question. Sometimes, what else, or why, or tell me more is just as powerful as some 5-step tool.
Right.
And so I got really comfortable with not having to have the most profound questions and trusting that we'd just get there. And I had I have a story. Yeah, I have a story of a moment where I realized how beautiful this presence was. I was coaching someone and I didn't know what to say next. Had no idea. I was in a total pause. I was giving myself permission to figure out what was next. It wasn't minutes, right? It was probably 3 or 4 seconds, but it was enough that my client got really fucking uncomfortable. And she started freaking out, wondering what I was thinking I was judging her. And we went on this entire path understanding her fears of silence and what people are thinking and like judging. And it was all based on the fact that I had no fucking clue what to say next.
Right. Exactly. That's so profound. So is that the
Right?
moment that you like really got the evidence?
I got that. I knew of it, but in that moment, it was like, oh, I knew I had arrived as a coach when I was willing to be silent
Yeah.
and not know what I was doing next.
That's so powerful. As you alluded to, you know, we think there are the rules and the tools and the processes and the exercises. And I know you talk to a lot of new coaches, and that's the majority of the questions revolve around some version of that, right? Like I need to tool up, you know, I need to get intellectually prepared so that I know what to say all the time. And I would agree wholeheartedly that so often the most profound moments are when you don't know what to say. Because if you think about it, if you know what to say, either you as the coach or them as the client, if you know what to say next, well, that means you're living in the realm of the familiar. If you know what to say, right? So the fact that we don't know means we're potentially about to bust through something. We're in uncharted territory. And yet we're so scared. Like we all want the effects of breaking through our comfort zone. We want the effects, whether it's for ourselves or for our clients. But we're so scared of not knowing what to say.
Yeah.
And now I relish those moments.
Yeah.
I was talking about this with, just to get into a little bit more of the coaching skills, because I think it's really valuable for a lot of people. And to remind people, just to kind of add this back to what you're talking about, like you've become really, really successful in a very short period of time compared to a lot of people's journeys. And I want to reconnect that for everybody, because I think you would agree that that's why you're successful, that you're okay bumping up against that moment where you don't know what to say.
Absolutely. I relish it. I just could feel my face light up as you said that. Like,
you relish it. So then the
relish
thing you're
it.
afraid of becomes the thing that we chase, the thing that we provoke, and the thing that we relish. That's a really good word to use.
Yeah. I see fear as fuel, and, you know, every time I have a new client come, so we were talking about this before we record, I spend a lot of time with prospective clients. I spend 90 minutes on a first session. I give them something to do between, and I spend another 60 minutes plus a 30-minute proposal. So I'm spending a lot of time with people.
It's 3 hours.
I'm also asking them for a lot of money, to be honest. So I want people who are going to be investing multiple 5 figures with me to feel like they know exactly what the transformation is going to be, and to experience it. I wanted them to feel it in their bodies, what it's like to make progress. So, but the first time I see someone on a 90-minute call, every time I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get anywhere. I don't know who this person is. What if I don't get anywhere? Part of the reason I do 90 minutes is it takes all the pressure off. 90 minutes is plenty of time to get somewhere. The biggest breakthrough could come 89 minutes in. Right. I get to just ask questions and be curious, and, oh, that's a window I could go down. Or, oh no, I think I'm going to hold off. I'm going to gather some more information. Oh, there's the window. But it's every time I'm scared I'm not going to find anything, and every time I do. So it's not like you bust through the fear and it goes away. It's there. You just know that it's going to be okay if the fear comes true, and chances are it won't. And what if there's that one client I don't find anything with? I guess like, let's do another session. Let's keep exploring. I don't think we got there today.
There's so much depth and wisdom in what you just said. And I'm glad you said pretty much, well, you didn't even say pretty much, every time your mind goes there. And I think so many new coaches think that if the doubt and the fear is present, well, then that means they're not ready. or that means they're not capable or competent yet, or what have you. And what you're saying is the fear and doubt better be present.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're probably not present, or maybe
Yeah.
you just don't really care. You know, I think
Yeah.
doubt and the fear comes from actually giving a damn. And so
Yeah.
get something out of those 90 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. One of my biggest things we talk about ands is about how to be more fearful and fearless and fearless. But I think all kinds of messages around being completely fearless and having no fear and going all in without it are damaging, because
Yeah.
those people who still have fear are judging themselves, and we should have fear. It's a compass. It's saying, this is something I care about. One of the most profound things I learned last year from Rich Litvin was that on the other side of every fear is a desire.
Yeah.
Right? Like on the other side of a fear of failure is success. On the other side of rejection is belonging, right? And so if I can connect with that desire, then I know my fear is my right compass. If there's no desire on the other side of my fear, that's not a fear that's relevant. But if I'm like, ooh, I really want to serve this person powerfully, then yeah, I'm going to get a little afraid that what if I don't? But it means I'm on the right track.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Is a compass. I think the fear is produced by conflicting forces, right? You got the desire, and then whatever the limiting belief is, or whatever the
it's whatever meaning you're going to make out of the fear coming true, right?
right, exactly. Yeah, and we're so afraid of the fears. Like it's so ridiculous when you break it down like this. You know, the thing that we should be using as a welcome sign, you know, we hold on to it as a warning sign.
Yeah.
And like, oh, go away from that. And yet on the other side is only everything. Because if we really truly didn't care about something,
then why are we going after it?
Be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Right? We
right.
Can't be afraid of confronting it.
So it's always on the other side is something we really want. So that's one way I help people connect with it and move through the fear. So
yeah,
I have like 6 or 7 things that I help people with. And the other one that I really think about is, let's actually take this, like, okay, the fear comes true. Then what? Right. So you just heard me say, so if I do 90 minutes with someone and I don't get to a big breakthrough or insight, then what? Oh, I invite them to a second session. That's not so bad. Right. And if you start asking, okay, what happens? Then what happens? Then what happens? And you get down to that sort of worst case scenario.
Yeah.
By the time you get to that, you're like, well, A, that's probably not going to happen. And oh, I guess that's not that bad. Right. So what happens if I post on Instagram and someone says something nasty to me? Well, then they don't like me. Then what?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I mean, the meaning we make is that I'm not likable, but if you can get to that bottomless fear, then you're going, well, is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. So many of our fears show up as questions, like you said, but we actually don't answer the question.
Yeah.
You
just gotta answer the question.
They don't like me.
Yeah.
Or fail, or what if they say no?
Yeah. So you just keep going until you get to the bottom of it. And most often that's enough to be like, all right, I can handle that. Right.
And
or
then there's nothing to be afraid of.
right. So like, that's how I talk about being fearful. Like, find the thing you're afraid of, because that's their compass. And then here's my strategies for fearing less. I don't want you to be fearless, because once you get rid of that fear, there's a little bit of like, maybe that wasn't the thing I should go after. But it kind of dispels it so you can move through the fear without being completely paralyzed. I still don't want people to not like me, but I also can recognize that it's okay if they don't.
That's a huge distinction, because I think in the whole idea of being fearless, or, you know, there's I don't know if this is unique to the personal development world or what. I mean, I learned it there, but, you know, the whole idea of 0 fucks given, and you really don't care if anybody doesn't like you. That's so unrealistic. And I think it's not even helpful.
Yeah.
But the idea of being fearless and truly not caring what other people think, like, that's called being a sociopath, right? We
Right.
truly don't care.
No, you've
But we
got to give a
care,
fuck,
but
and
still,
you
yeah,
think you can give a fuck and not give a fuck, right?
yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I talk
Put
about
that up
is,
a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, like
'Cause
I
that's an
also talk
and,
about,
obviously.
yeah, it's an and it's like I give so many fucks about the people who are supposed to be in my world, right? The people who are drawn to me, who I am here to serve on this planet. I care so deeply that two things. I don't give a fuck about the other people because I can't serve everyone. And we've talked about this before. You try to serve everyone, you serve nobody.
Yeah.
But I also give so much of a fuck about my clients that I don't give a fuck if I have to say something that might make them fire me.
All right. Say that again.
Yeah. Because it's powerful, right?
Yeah.
I give so much of a fuck about my clients and their transformation and what they're up to in the world that I will say things that I don't give a fuck if they fire me. And I've had that. I've had clients get pissed off at me and I've been ready for them to fire me. I am willing to lose my clients in service of their transformation.
That's so big.
Right?
It really,
that's hard for a lot of people. It took me a while to get there. I was so into pleasing my, not like overly pleasing, but I would be careful. Like I'll serve them and I'll tell them the truth only to the point where they won't fire me. And now I'm like, no, I care so much about you and what you're up to, and you're in a disempowered state, and I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah.
And if you fire me, okay, you probably won't.
Yeah. And then what? Right? Just
right
off the waiting list.
Well, and they won't. And the thing is, it usually calls them more powerfully forward.
So
right.
true.
So the minute you're willing to let them go is the minute they come back. Because that you've now powerfully served them. And that's a place that they're not being told by anybody else.
Yeah, there's so much coaching wisdom. I mean, life and relationship as well, but so much coaching wisdom in that it's the willingness, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, being willing to, because really what it comes down to, I think, is the fear of abandonment. Mm-hmm. I think we all have a fear of abandonment at a deep level. And so we're willing to be as bold, so bold, but not enough that you'll abandon me.
Right.
Okay? And going back to the conversation we were having about what other people say is going to be successful or what other people say is going to be safe, we pretty much live our whole lives to not be abandoned. Mm-hmm. And which is different than living our lives to be accepted, right?
Totally.
Like we're actually not trying to be accepted. We're trying to not be abandoned.
Absolutely.
And that the stifling that happens, because obviously, if my goal is for you to not abandon me, then you have all the power.
Right.
And I need to know what your expectations of me are and what the boundaries are, so that you won't abandon the version of me that you don't like. But then obviously, as soon as I'm done with you and I go to somebody else, everything could be out the window, because now I need to appease somebody else with their versions of what they expect of me or what have you. And then, living life that way causes us to not even really truly know who we are.
Totally.
Like that's what's at stake in what you said, I think, is, are we ever going to truly meet ourselves if we're so afraid of people firing us, whether it's in a coaching context or a relationship, and we be abandoned? Yep. And I think in order for us, and I'm just basically saying my version of what you said, like in order for us to really know ourselves, I don't think we have to be abandoned, but I think we have to be willing to.
We have to be willing. The willing, I have this posted on I don't see if I can put it up here. It says, "What are you willing to lose?" And it's from my friend Varian Brandon, that she makes a willing to lose list, and almost everything in her life she's willing to lose in service of her, and herself, and she's powerful. This is Varian Brandon is one of the most powerful coaches I've ever met in my life. She's fascinating. but this willingness to lose. And what's so beautiful, she said it and I've experienced it myself, the minute you're willing to lose the other person is the minute your relationship deepens. So I have been willing to lose my clients and our relationship deepens because now they're showing up in a different way. My relationship with my own coach, I had a fear of abandonment with her because we started going real deep and I started getting real worried that she was going to say, I'm done with you.
Right.
And we had a big conversation around it. And the minute I said, I'm willing to lose Christina Berkeley, our relationship got way better. It's like one of my favorite relationships in the world right now, other than my wife and some of my best friends, my coach, because I'm willing to lose her every minute of every day. And so I tell her everything.
All right. So let's open that up. Because I can even find, I feel my own resistance to that, right? And conceptually I understand. And yet immediately I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And where my mind went is marriage, right? My wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned your wife. So I totally get it when it comes to clients. In the way that we already opened that up, right? I'm willing to be so truthful with you that you might fire me. I get it. How does that apply to romantic relationships? I mean, we're both married, so let's just use that as the context, and people can find themselves in it wherever they find themselves. It just doesn't feel like.
So it's less about truth telling.
I'm willing to lose my wife. So go ahead.
Well, it's willing to lose in service of me, because here's the problem, right? We get lost in our relationships and we lose ourselves. And so the idea is that if I have to choose between disappointing somebody else and disappointing me, I got to disappoint somebody else. That's a great Glennon Doyle quote. We don't choose ourselves. We tend to please and choose others. So I have to be willing to lose my wife in order to not lose me.
I don't know how from Michigan you just turned my thermostat up. I don't know how that just happened.
It's really hot in here too, but I think it's because of my light. It's probably going to go out soon and it'll be much better.
Wow.
Yeah, shit, right?
Wow. So the deep, scary reality, I think, that I pulled out of what you just said is, so where my mind went is, I'm not willing to lose my wife. Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get to that point where I'm willing to lose my wife. And what you said, however you actually worded it, was, but are you losing yourself in not being willing to lose your wife? And that's my God, that's a question. That's a pretty powerful shift.
And my experience so far with it is, the more I'm not willing to lose me, the less likely I am to lose her. And it's a model for each other, right?
Yeah, that's really, really powerful and scary. And
it's scary, and it requires a lot of communication, right? There's a lot of communication, but it's it's the fear of abandonment, right? And we don't have to be in the things I want for myself can be exactly what my wife wants for herself or for us. But every time we abandon ourselves, we lose ourselves, right? And so who are you more afraid of abandonment from, yourself or your partner? Self-abandonment, man, that's rough.
Right.
And we do it all the time. We do it all the time when we try to please other people. We do it all the time when we try to please our bosses. We do it when we try to please our clients as coaches. When we try to pretzel into, oh, I can fit you in at this time slot, even though it's way past my bedtime, or I will, I'll talk to you on WhatsApp. Even right?
You're stepping on some people's toes right now.
But we do it. We pretzel, and so when we do it for ourselves, we model it for everybody else.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, I'm going to not abandon myself, but you should abandon you. No, you go not abandon yourself, and we'll figure out how to not abandon ourselves together.
Yeah. Just a moment ago, when we were unpacking that, I saw it from the other perspective, which I think is what you just alluded to basically, is what I want my wife to abandon herself to make me happy.
Right.
And immediately the answer is no. Like I don't need any time. Immediately the answer is no. I want her to be authentically happy. But it's so interesting how, I'll just own this for me, like how scary it is to serve myself and create those boundaries and potentially make somebody mad or potentially make them think I don't like them, and how willing I am to sacrifice self to appease somebody else. And if I was going to take this one step further, then if I'm sacrificing myself, have I actually connected with another person?
No,
right?
That's therein lies the rub.
Yeah.
Is that the best way to connect is to connect with you first. And it's not to say that we don't compromise in our relationship. And I want to make that distinction, right? We do have to have communication and compromise. But there are so many ways in which we disconnect from our desire. We disconnect from who we are in order to please the other person, connect with the other person, prevent abandonment from the other person. And when I say my relationship with my coach has gotten so much better, it's because I am so now connected with me and so open with me that I'm open with her. And we see, so I don't see it on her side as much. We're starting to get to know each other in a better way, but I am so not going to abandon me that I don't care if she abandons me. And the more I share of me that's scary, the more connected we feel. And I feel the same way with my wife. It's just my coaching relationship's one of those safer containers where I can actually do that without, having a complete anxiety attack about, let me tell you all my shadows. Let me tell you all the deep, dark secrets.
Right.
But I'm okay with my deep, dark secrets. I'm not abandoning me. I love me. I care about me. I got me. So if you abandon me, that's fine.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about me. Deep shit, man.
Right. I was just going to say, like, the level that this conversation just went to is like sacred, like deep.
That's what we all want, is the sacred relationship.
Right.
And we think that the sacred relationship comes outside of us.
We think the sacred relationship comes outside of us. If they could just fill our void, if they could tell us we're enough, if they can promise that they won't abandon us, then we will sacrifice. It's that's the prostitution of the soul.
Yeah. And I can tell you about my vulnerabilities, but only if you're validating me for it's okay. You still love me, right? I'm a completely open book about my vulnerabilities because I don't need anyone to validate me anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm still human every so often, right? But for the most part, you can't take something from me and hurt me, something that doesn't hurt me myself.
That's
right?
So big. Yeah.
Right. So I don't need my wife to tell me that I do sometimes when I'm in my anxiety, but like for the most part, right, I don't need someone to go tell me that this part of me is okay, that it's still lovable. I don't need someone to listen to my sad story from before and validate that, wow, that was hard, whatever. No, I got me.
You got
the more I connect with me, the more I'm willing to share with others. The more I'm willing to share with others, the more open our connection is and the more they share back. Right? That's part of it.
Right. Yeah, that's the counter-intellectual truth, I would say. Because
Mm-hmm.
the intellect will tell us the exact opposite. The intellect will say
Absolutely.
they're going to leave us if they know about our shadows. So the best way to
Yeah.
make sure that doesn't happen is don't share the shadows, and then convince yourself you don't have any, and
Mm-hmm.
you're perfect, and that's the way to stay safe. And
And I'll add a deeper layer to that too, is now
yeah,
that I am so intimately familiar with my own shadows and learning to love them, and it's a journey all the time, the more I love everybody else's shadows too.
that piece.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like I had that conversation with a client today, because she was having a real hard time accepting parts of her, and I recognized how much I love those parts of her, and how much I love those parts of all of my clients, and how much I love those parts of my wife now, because I love those parts of me.
Yeah.
So it's not just that we're not abandoning ourselves. It's like we're learning to really belong to ourselves, as Brene Brown would say, and really learning to love ourselves. And as soon as we do that, we love everybody else the way we love us. I
Yeah.
now want to see people's humanities. I want to see the shadows.
Right.
The stuff that you put out and paint in front of me, that's all the happy stuff, that's fine. I want to know what makes you think you suck.
Yeah.
I want to know what sends you into anxiety attacks. I want to know where you're not a perfect person sometimes.
And for you to be able to have the capacity for that with other people requires you to have the capacity with yourself.
Uh-huh.
And there's a word that you didn't say. It's the opposite of what you said, I think, which is toleration. And I think we tend to, I mean, that's like one of the goals of society is tolerance, right? We even talk about that, like that's the goal, you know, whether it's racial tolerance or tolerance toward, you know, anybody other, right? Whatever the other part is different than your team. And toleration is not embracing, and toleration is not loving, as you said, and accepting. And so if we live a life of self-toleration, then probably the best we could have is a life of others' toleration. And certainly there's no connection in that. There's no juice. There's no joy.
It's welcoming. It's welcoming all the parts.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done, right? I'm sitting here going,
I was just
this
going to
sounds
say,
intellectually
process or
no, but I'm learning pieces of it. There's a method that a guy named Stephen Gilligan does that's generative trans, but he also is calling it creative mind. But the whole idea is welcoming all parts of you. It's so Andy. But it's literally, and part of the method, you take people into a deeper state, embodied state, and you welcome all the parts, and you you assume that they all make sense. And you know, that's
that they all make sense.
Yeah, I'm learning. This is like very new, so I might be butchering it a little bit, but I've had coaching sessions with my coach, with Christina, where she said those words to me, so I know it's a thing. And you know, what if the inner critic makes sense, and what if we welcome it? What if our fear makes sense and we welcome it? What if that part of us that is sometimes manipulative makes sense and we welcome it?
And really, it all makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like if we do the shadow work or the trauma work or looking back at our experiences, it all makes sense. If we have that bigger picture of, you know, why did this human create those patterns or those fears or those desires. I remember somebody told me one time, I think somebody told it to me, or I read it in a book or something, that everybody has a story that they don't want you to know. And if you knew their story, everything would make sense. And I think it was in the context of like, pick somebody that you don't like, right? Or pick a relationship you've got a lot of conflict in right now. It could be in a marriage or somebody that you love. And I think what's really profound about this is we don't need to know the story. We just need to know there is one.
Right.
And if we can know that the details would make sense if we knew them, then it actually releases us from having to know them.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we need to apply that to ourselves. Like, I don't understand why I'm afraid of this, or I don't understand why I have this behavior pattern. I don't understand that.
Yeah. But this must make sense.
You know what's so cool about that is if something makes sense, then we're going to be more open to actually figuring it out.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're coming to a place that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of does it make sense or not, I know it does.
Yeah. And the
So
minute you stop trying to quiet something, because we try to quiet these things, right? The fears, the voices, the inner critics, the things that hold us back. Problem is, the minute you try to quiet them, they just get louder.
Right.
So if you stop trying to quiet them, they're just, and let them be there, they actually quiet themselves down. Once they make sense and they're welcome, they lose all their power.
That's so true. It's like opening the closet with the flashlight, looking for the closet. Yep. Right?
Yep. That's one of my metaphors I use, talking about like when people have fears, the monster's in the closet as long as they haven't checked. Right. It actually is in the closet as long as you haven't checked, because it has power over you. So all you got to do is go look in the closet and have faith that if there really is a monster, you'll deal with it. And if 99.9% of the time, there's probably not a monster in the closet.
But doesn't it just become so much more powerful when we don't check, right? Like it owns us more.
It does exist. That's the thing. People are like, well, if I don't check, I don't know if it exists. No, as long as you're not checking, it exists, because it is the monster in your closet that has power over you.
That's profound. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go check. That's one of the reasons I say yes to fear. Let's go check.
Let's go see. Let's see.
Yeah.
And everything that happens, it will be okay. Like there's just such a power in that. It's like a predetermination. I don't know if there's a word that you use for it, but if we just start from there, if we start from
the premise. Yeah. You start from the premise that very few things lead to death, right? Which is the ultimate fear. And abandonment's probably a big one, but if you do the reality check, most things will not lead to ultimate abandonment.
Right.
Once you, okay, well, I'm just going to go check. And you just got to stop deciding the consequences of everything is death. Like it feels like death, right? Someone rejects you, feels like death. You fail at something, feels like death.
Right.
It's not.
It's so true. And we're all undefeated, up against so far.
Totally.
Taking us out yet.
And the biggest rewards come from busting through fears. The thing, because it's, again, go back to that, it's a desire. And it's much more interesting to say I courageously went through a fear rather than I just did some things.
Just stayed safe.
I just stayed safe.
Life.
I'd rather ask people for way more money than I think they'll pay and be afraid that they're going to think I'm crazy than never know if someone might have said yes.
That's so good. I'd rather be afraid than never know if they would actually say yes.
Yeah. The fear of what if I don't? The fear of what if I don't is so much greater for me than the fear of what if I do.
I think that shift. Now, is that a shift that you've moved into just over the last couple of years?
I'd say over the last. No, I actually don't think so. I think I didn't notice that was a fear that I lived into, but I can think of college when I came out. I actually didn't know what I was feeling, like gay, straight, whatever. And the only way I knew I would figure it out is if I came out as something, and I thought I could backtrack it if I figured out that I wasn't. And the fear of what if I don't explore this and find out was much greater than the fear of outing myself, which was at the time 2004. It was pretty dicey. I'm not as dicey as way back, but definitely 2004 was a thing. And the same thing happened when I did my top surgery. The fear of what if I don't try this was so much greater than the fear of what happens when I do. And I had a wonderful coach at the time, Caitlin Paget, who helped me get to that space of realizing that. But I've seemed to operate on that fear of what if I don't. And it's finding the sweet spot where the fear of both, like that's my compass, right? Like I want to still have the fear of what if I do, because that means I'm going after something big.
Right.
And I want to have the fear of what if I don't and that usually outweighs the fear of what if I do. If it doesn't outweigh it, then I don't do it.
That's a big piece. If it doesn't outweigh it, then it's probably not big enough. It's probably not important enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had a coach one time ask me, I think he first asked me what my goals were, and I gave a list of goals. Here's a business context, what do you want to do over the next 2 years or something? And then we had another session later, I think it was a few weeks later, and he said, what are the goals? He might not have even used the word goals, but it was like, what are the things that 2 years from now you would regret if you didn't do?
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing because I had answered the first question when he asked it the first time. And it was amazing what came out of me the second time. Because immediately my mind said, it's not okay if I don't do that. It's not okay if I don't publish a book. And one of the things for me at the time was speak on a TEDx stage. It's not okay with me if I don't do this. And to me, that's the fear of regret versus the fear of failure, the fear of rejection. Right? So many of us are more afraid. Actually, I don't think we're more afraid. I think we're more afraid.
We just don't connect with the fear of regret.
Rejection. But I think all of us are actually more afraid of the fear of regret.
I think we are too. And you ask me all the time about, what's helped me create massive action in my business. It's all being fueled by the fear of what if I don't? What if I don't take massive action? What if I don't put my all into this? What if I don't take a leap and go all in? That all of it's what if I don't? And I have no clue where my business is going, but I have no doubt it's big. And my fear of what if I don't see where it goes is so much bigger than whatever fear I have around visibility or success or failure or rejection.
That's everything. And, we were talking about answering the question, what if, right? What if I do? And what if there's a monster? And what if they say no? And if we push those answers, we're going to find some version of it'll be okay, right? Like I'll be okay, whatever. But if we push through the questions that you just said, and we're talking about now, what if I don't try? What if I don't risk? Then I think the beauty in that is if we push hard enough, we will get to the opposite answer, which is I won't be okay.
Yeah. I won't be okay. Try. Yeah. Yeah.
That's powerful. And yet we use the I won't be okay to keep us from trying.
Yep.
The construct of if it goes, if everything goes to hell, then I won't be okay. Then I'm going to lose all my money. I'm going to be, naked and afraid and alone under a bridge somewhere.
Yeah.
So we use the construct of I won't be okay to protect us in the moment. I hesitate with that word because it's not really a protection, but it feels like it's a protection to protect us from that risk. But all of that is actually producing something because
far greater
that we actually wouldn't be okay if we don't try, if we don't see. And I would imagine you believe this to be true. It goes in line with everything we've been talking about here, that it doesn't matter if the thing actually gets produced. It doesn't matter if the client says yes. It doesn't matter if the accomplishment actually is realized.
Yeah.
What matters is that we try.
Yeah. And there's an and right there. It's high intention and low attachment.
Bingo.
Right? That's one of my foundational ones is I'm going after it with high intention, high commitment. I'm going to do everything possible. And I am completely unattached to if it happens, when it happens, or how it happens.
And that increases the likelihood that it all happens and more. Like the thing that we can't even fathom.
There goes my light. Yep.
There's the light that you
There's the light. I need a better light.
What's going to happen if the light goes out? Oh no.
Yeah, right. Well, and what happens is about creativity. Going back to creativity. As soon as I have high intention but low attachment to what happens, I can look around and see what else is coming my way, right? Like I can see, I use this metaphor a lot, right? If you're driving, high intention to drive from LA to New York, and if I map it out beforehand and take all the highways, I'm not looking around at the road signs going turn left, go see the big cross in Oklahoma or Texas. I think it's in Texas, or go up to Glacier in North Dakota. That's where you want to go. So as soon as I have high intention but low attachment, my view is expanded, and I can see all the signs that tell me it's time to take a little detour, or do it this way, or take the scenic route, or you don't even need to go to New York at all.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, that we're open to catching the opportunities, and we're open to reading the signs. When we have our blinders on, staying committed to the rules. And all this goes back to coaching, like we were talking about a little while ago. Like opening up the awareness of questions to ask, or connections that are made, or the words that the client is screaming but not saying. All of that requires this detached awareness. And
it's one of the hardest things I've found for people to practice. So I'm teaching this in this Amplify program. It's
that's
one
awesome.
of those things where yeah, I play with words a lot these days. But it's one of those things that we're just so taught that achieving a particular end or outcome is what will fulfill us, right? The outcome of I'm going to make $1 million, or I'm going to get this client to a breakthrough, or whatever. It's going to bring us happiness. It's going to bring us fulfillment. It's going to bring us the sense of enoughness. And so what we do is cling to that outcome to fill a void. And we don't need that outcome to fill the void.
Right.
And so if we recognize that the happiness doesn't come because we made $1 million, or the fulfillment, or the enoughness, then we're open to, well, what if I go past that? Or what if I don't get there, but I get real close? Or what if I go left and, do something completely different?
Right.
I think we still need a compass. That's why I like high intention. I'm not a complete surrender experiment. Like, let's just see how life flows at you. I think you have to be in motion towards things, but you're in motion, but you're open. Because it's not about getting somewhere.
Right. Yeah, that's a big distinction, to stay in motion and not be attached to the pre-decided outcome, whether it's a goal or a destination or whatever the case is. And it actually increases the likelihood that you'll go where you're meant to go.
Yeah.
And not where you thought you were headed.
Yeah. And I'll say a great example this year for me is, it was before COVID hit. I decided to give up on all financial goals for the year and have high intention to create amazing clients, and have no idea how I was doing it, what I was doing. I filled my practice. A podcast came into my purview. Would have never in a million years thought I was going to be doing a podcast. Now It's one of the most fun things I'm doing. Right. It's opening doors to other opportunities. And it's all because I had high intention to just see whatever I could do this year without any attachment to how much money I created. And I'm well over what I made last year. I'm on track to double from last year.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
it's all because
you pulled
I'm open.
Yeah.
Yeah. High intention towards creating. The high intention was to serve my ass off, master my coaching, and to bring in the inspiring clients that I wanted to work with. That was it.
That's powerful. Just like that. There's essence to those words instead of measurability, instead of, a dollar amount.
Yeah.
And instead of
Well, that's
ego.
ultimately what we want. That's the problem.
Right.
We have all these external things that we think are going to create what we want. At the base of what we always want is happiness. But if you give people a list of 10 things that they want, they will rank happiness below like money, relationships, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. But ultimately underneath money, happiness.
Right.
And so that's the same thing. I'm in coaching to serve. I am in coaching to become the best. I want to be like the Michael Jordan of coaching. Not that I want to be famous necessarily, but like I want to be a master of what I do.
Right.
And I want to serve people who I like are inspiring to me, who are up to big things in the world, who I can help. The money is an indicator of me doing those things.
That's a really powerful way to put it. If I would have finished your sentence, I would have said byproduct, but I like indicator. So the amount of money coming in is really indicating how much we're serving.
Yeah.
In this context, for anybody, you know, that wants to be a coach or, you know, service in any way, it's an indicator. And so if we don't have the money, then just go serve more. And that's not the way we're taught.
Mm-mm.
We tend to think whatever we're missing, then go get that. And how many people, you know, on this planet throughout time I have a friend who's a financial planner, and he said, the amount of miserable multimillionaires that I've met is staggering.
Yeah.
Miserable multimillionaires.
Yep.
Whew, just
There
that phrase.
Ton of them. And there's a lot of miserable, it's not just coaches. I see people who are, you know, entrepreneurs in the online space who've made 7 figures miserable. And I even see it in certain coaching groups I'm part of that the marketing is like, get to 10K months, get to 20K months. And I'm like, I know that they're preying on, and I don't like to use the word preying. They're appealing to what we all want is we want to make a good living. But underneath it, okay, are you doing a 20K month because you're again abandoning yourself, abandoning the service you want to get in because the external reward of proving to yourself that you can make 6 figures is worth it to you? I always love seeing the posts where it's like, you know, not even remotely a mention of money.
Right. That's it. Do you want to make a good living, or do you want to be living good?
Right. And we can do both. It's an and, right?
Exactly.
But it really comes from you. I can't remember if this was Rich who said this. Someone said it's like people think they're going to make income and then they're going to have an impact and then that's going to give them inner peace. And the other way around, you get inner peace, then you're going to make impact, then you're going to make income.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah. It's just so backwards from the way that most of us are thinking, because that's the way we've been taught.
Yeah.
Programmed.
Yeah. So much goodness.
You took us some places.
You're welcome.
I know, right? Yeah. I really, really appreciate it. And I know that's how you operate, obviously, and being willing to be disruptive and being willing to care so much that you risk losing. It's so powerful, the quote that you said, what are you willing to lose? So how can people find you if you want to be found? How can people?
I do want to be found. I absolutely want to be found.
I know you got your podcast, which I think is amazing. Tell people how they can find you.
So Life in the End is the podcast, and you are going to be on it in a few weeks in October. We got some amazing guests. So Life in the End's on all the podcast services. And then really the best way to spend time with me is in my Facebook community. So the Facebook community is called the Heart Leader Launchpad. See, I'm all about heart these days, right? Heart Leader Launchpad. And it's full of service-oriented, transformational folks in business, a lot of coaches, but some people up to other things. I share stuff pretty much every day. It's a really engaged community. People could find me on my website. It's a little outdated what the contents around it, but it's aaronmbaker.com. It's a way to directly get to me. But really the Heart Leader Launchpad is where all the juice is.
Beautiful. Aaron M. Baker,
Yep.
or ERINM. And then
yeah. Don't forget the M. There's lots of Aaron Bakers out there.
Yeah.
Apparently taking my wife's last name was wonderful and made it a little more difficult. Yeah, it did. Even Dr. Aaron Baker didn't work. So it's Aaron M. Baker.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, Sean Smith wasn't available either, unless I think at one point they offered me, or they said they would sell it for $70,000 or something like that.
Oh, gee. Nope.
That's a quick nope. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For your wisdom, like really, really deep conversation. I'll be vibrating about some of these things for the rest of the night and many times in the future, I'm sure.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And admire you, and the work that you're doing in the world is just incredible. Life in the and. Life in the and stay tuned. The Andifesto, and at some point the book, I'm baby stepping it. I have a cover drawn out, but baby stepping the book. It's going to be called And, How One Word Can Change Your Life, Your Business, and the World. Wow. That's powerful. I hadn't heard that yet. Yep. That's powerful. Baby steps though. I got too much on my plate right now, but it's coming. Yeah, you've found your thing. I have. At least currently, we'll see what it evolves into. Powerful. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And appreciate you too. All righty. Take care. Now, if you like this video and you want more discussion about transformational life coaching, check out that video where we talk about how to heal from the inside out. I mean, if you want to be a coach and you want to be have a successful coaching business, then you have to understand a very important piece about business. You can't out-market a bad product.